Hey everyone, Facebook community. This is Josie with Emotional Wisdom, and I have an experience to discuss. So this is storytelling, guys. First of all, I like to storytell when I convey a concept through the process of sharing my personal experience, so I can tie in what I believe to be, how I help people to identify their triggers, to identify what they believe in, to learn to identify their core beliefs. And if their core beliefs are not serving them, I help them realize what their core belief is, and then from there help them replace it with another beneficial belief. Okay, so I've learned that by implementing my personal examples of what I've lived, and what I've unraveled through my personal experience through life, I realize that it's more effective to deliver a concept when I share a personal experience. It makes it more tangible. It makes it more relatable. It helps you correlate it with your own personal experiences as you're hearing me dive into the experience and how I was able to identify, in this case, a trigger or triggers that help me understand where I'm stuck in or where I still need healing in. So I've learned that what better way to share my personal experience, right? The way I address myself, I address triggers, I address learning where I still need integration, where I'm still wounded in, and that's what our discussion is going to be about. So I recently took a trip to San Diego. It was a very, very rewarding experience. The trip to San Diego I was able to experience very many emotions, rather said, from feeling bliss, from feeling discomfort in situations that reminded me of certain things that made me feel emotionally sad. But most importantly, it was one of the trips to San Diego where I felt the most freest, if you will. So basically, I will be discussing one or two of my triggers, which took place in the tail ends of my trip when we were driving back from San Diego. In this case, there were two triggers in one incident or in one experience where it led me to realize that an aspect was still stuck in the past, in fear of experiencing the same uncomfortable emotion. And I will go into detail in a bit. My storytelling tends to be kind of long, and it's for a purpose. I like to cover all angles. And if you also have any questions, I would like to read them. Like if any questions arise during my story time and me sharing my experience, please write it down, type it, and then I could answer it before I log off. But okay, so I'm going to begin. We were watching, my significant other, we were watching a Red Table Talk episode. This Red Table Talk episode was about awareness. It was the way they were putting into perspective, and once it was over, I opened the discussion for my significant and I to kind of dive deeper into it as far as understanding furthermore ourselves and how powerful that is and so forth. And he felt that after watching that episode, and mind you, I have received his consent to share our journey together. So that's very, very important, is that I have received consent since I am sharing our journey. Obviously, I want him to be okay with that. And of course, he's like, if it brings awareness, by all means. So thank you, babe. Okay, so we were done watching the Red Tabletop Talk episode. And he then felt compelled, I guess he felt it was safe to share about a certain experience he had or he personally felt. And this was a couple of hours before, I want to say a couple of hours prior into our drive back home. Yeah, like about 3 hours prior or so. So he proceeds to reiterate about what happened when he asked for a favor. And I'm going to dive into that favor. So let's rewind 3 hours earlier into this. And when we were driving back home, he was getting tired. And every time he gets tired, he likes eating pistachios because they keep him occupied, right? The shell, he breaks it open, so it just keeps him occupied and just awake. So he asked if I can grab his pistachios that were in a specific bag. Of course, I take off my seatbelt and I go to the back, if you will, and I'm literally hovering over the seat, and I'm digging my hand. I'm digging. I cannot find the bag of pistachios. And I do get frustrated as I'm digging and I'm trying to search for them. A part of me gets impatient, essentially. So as I get impatient, I then make I then reply, or I respond. If you know that you were going to eat pistachios and those keep you awake, right? Why did you put it in the bottom of the bag? Literally, that's how I said it. I said it in a tone that was not in an angry tone. It was not in a frustrated tone. Well, maybe in a frustrated tone, but very subtle. I said, why would you put it in the bottom, right? If you know that you were going to want them, and that's the thing. That's your thing. First off, we were leaving the hotel. We were in a hurry to check out. So obviously, if we're in a hurry to check out, we're not really thinking strategically as to, oh, let me, strategically pack my stuff. So since I eat pistachios in the road, then I need my bag on the top. Sometimes we can't think of all that because obviously we are prioritizing. We need all of our stuff in our bag so we can leave. So that is priority, right? So no one's really thinking about, oh, let's put the bag of pistachios in the very top. But at the moment, I'm not thinking that, right? My response is, okay, I'm hovering over here. I am without a belt, dangerous, and I can't seem to find the bag. So I felt, typically when you feel annoyed and you feel frustrated, you tend to want to blame someone for positioning you in that place, in that position. It just how it goes. We tend to want to blame them. But in all actuality, it's not their fault. But I said it. I said, well, why would you put it down in the very bottom if you know we're going to, if you're going to need them, in the road? So he didn't say anything. I found them and I gave it to him and I put my seatbelt back on and everything was fine. Hours later is when we saw the episode. And that opened the discussion, and he then felt, I guess, safe enough to bring up that incident, right? Apparently, I must have sounded like I knew what I was talking about, and I was aware, and whatever the case may be, that he then felt safe to mention it. Hey, since we're in the topic of discussion, why did you get upset and blame me for the pistachios? And I don't remember if that's how he said it verbatim, but he said something along those lines. He goes, how would you explain that, right? And how would you explain that, you got irritated and stuff? And I said, first off, I said, when I got impatient and I got frustrated, and it was because of me. So I took full responsibility of feeling that impatience and that annoyance slash frustration, I guess. It was me. It wasn't him. So when I told him, I apologized. That was actually all me. I just felt frustrated that I was doing all of this, and because you asked me to get the pistachios, and I was in a situation where I then felt frustrated I was in, I then said, essentially want to blame the other person that positioned us in that state. I said, so first off, it's me. I take full responsibility and ownership of this situation. And he said, and then I said, so it was, I guess it was just a reaction from an action for me to say, well, why would you put him there? And I proceeded to explain to him that it was not intentional, that because I was positioned in that situation, it just happened. I just said, hey, why did you put him in the bottom? And I said, and basically I explained myself. I said it wasn't the patient thing to do, but I did it. It was just a reaction. So I apologize if I hurt your feelings and made you feel like the bad guy, or like the one that you did something wrong, when in all actuality it was me and my lack of patience. So after I admitted, it's almost like, to a certain degree, he wasn't getting it still. So he proceeded to say, well, why couldn't you be more compassionate, right? Because if it was me and you would ask something, a favor, I wouldn't get annoyed if I was positioned in a situation. I would have approached the situation differently. And to be honest, I know he would have. He would have addressed the situation differently. But then I told him, I said, but that was a reaction that I had. And right now I'm telling you that I'm sorry and that it was all me, that I was the one that felt impatient in that position, in that moment in time. So I said what I said. I didn't yell. It was just a comment. And then I said, so do you feel you're more compassionate than me because you would have thought through the situation? Like he said, he would have thought through the situation and then wouldn't have made me feel bad. So that means you're more compassionate? And he goes, yes. I go, first off, close your eyes and envision that moment playing out again. And you feeling, in a sense, blamed for my irritation. Then react like you were courageous to tell me, hey, why are you blaming me? Just because I asked you for a favor, why is it now my fault? What do you think I would have done? I would have apologized. I would have said, I am sorry. I didn't mean to. It was just me being positioned in an uncomfortable situation. After a while, I then said, why would you put it in the very bottom or hide it when you know you're going to want it, right? So it's, in a sense, what we do when we are kind of like we want to deflect and blame another and not take responsibility. It's kind of what we do. So he said, well, he goes, yeah, it would make me feel better. If I would have said something and you would have apologized, it would have made me feel better, because then I know that it wasn't me who made you feel like this. I wouldn't have felt blamed for your impatience or for the incident. And I said, exactly. So because you chose to not say anything, because conversation somehow equals or means confrontation, or you speaking how you feel, somehow you think that that's going to create friction and uncomfortableness or an argument, you decided to reserve how you felt. Therefore, you essentially sacrificed yourself, or you essentially sacrificed yourself to, in a sense, keep the peace, right? Yes. So if that would have been you and it would have been reversed, and you would have had to be the one searching for something, right, for me, and then you would have got maybe slightly annoyed or uncomfortable, you would have not said something. So even though you would have felt, and it was reversed, even though you would have felt some type of way after reaching for the pistachios or trying to find them, you would have reserved that feeling and what you felt, because you essentially don't want to make someone feel bad, right? Or you don't want to create a sense of friction, right? And it goes, yeah. I then put into perspective and I said, well, that's essentially sacrificing yourself. In fact, that's not being compassionate. That's actually sacrificing you, abandoning what you really feel to accommodate another. So essentially, you're doing it from a space of not authentic, from a non-authentic space. And when you do things from a space of fear, or you feel you don't want to say something because you don't want to create a problem, or you feel like you don't want to talk about how you feel because that potentially can open a door for discomfort or an argument or of any sort, you're not really being compassionate. You're not really saving the discomfort or argument. You're really just doing a disservice to everyone involved in the relationship, right? Like if we don't, and I'm speaking in regards for anyone that does that. If you tend to not want to speak how you feel because somewhere along the line it turned unsafe to talk about how you feel because someone else is going to receive it as a negative experience, right? And going to feel it as an attack, then you're going to learn that, dang, I need to choose my times wisely as to where I can say how I feel, or not even say them at all. But that is not, that's not being compassionate, or that is not being virtuous, or that is not being the wise one. That is, you're actually really just sacrificing yourself and abandoning aspects of who you really and how you really feel and who you really are at the moment in time. So if anything, me reacting from that action and saying what I said to my significant other, essentially that was me being more authentic. That was me really expressing what I felt. Now, if my significant other would have felt comfortable and safe to say, well, why did you respond like that? You know, why did you make me feel like the bad guy? I would have then given the opportunity to remedy the situation, to apologize and to say, it was me. I am the one that got impatient. It was me who lacked the patience. So therefore, I essentially deflected and wanted to blame someone, which is you, because you positioned me to get uncomfortable, if you will. So, and that would have cleared the air, because it would have then proven that it wasn't about him, that it was about me, that it was about me. I am the one in that place, and it's not about him. So when we started diving deeper and understanding how we think we're being compassionate, or we think we're being the bigger person at the expense of who? At the expense of who? Like, are we doing this because, from what space? From what motive? Are we doing this because we don't want to seem argumental? Are we doing this because we want to seem like we got it together, or we don't want to start a problem? From what space are we choosing to stay quiet and silencing what we feel? From what space, what core motive, if that makes sense? So that's very important, because if we are silencing what we feel just to save ourselves discomfort, it's going to blow up in your face. It's going to blow up in your face, because you're only going to gather with time those annoyance of that person, that what you wanted to share and how you wanted to share as far as how you feel, you're not going to be able to share it. So you're going to stuff it in you. And then when another situation arises and you can't speak how you really feel, you're going to stuff it and you're going to stuff it and you're going to stuff it and you're going to bottle it until it blows up like a volcano, until you blow up and you get angry and start pulling out receipts of why you blew up. I blew up because of this, remember this time, remember that time, remember when you did this, remember when you did that. And that's not really, again, being virtuous because you don't want to start arguments. That's not essentially being compassionate because you don't want to start arguments. No, that's actually you denying from expressing how you really feel. So therefore, when you don't speak how you feel, you're sacrificing yourself for the other, and that will blow up in your face eventually if you found yourself doing it over and over and over. So I can't emphasize enough that speak what you feel at the time. Because if something arises that discomforts you, that makes you feel uncomfortable, and you speak it at the time, it won't come out in an angry space or from an angry, it won't be with a tone of anger. It won't be from a place of just blowing up. It'll literally be from a place of just sharing. This is how I feel. And I'm going to repeat that. When you start continuing to get courageous to speak how you feel in the moments that arise, the situation arises that makes you feel some type of way, and you share how that made you feel, you won't position yourself to blow up months later, right? Because when you blow up, it's because you already withheld how you feel moment and moment and moment again. And it just perpetuates over and over and over and over. So going back to my example with my significant other, so when we were discussing that, he understood. He said, and that's true, I'm essentially wanting you to change who you are. And whenever we have to change who we are for another, and not because we authentically attain the awareness, then that also, we can create resentment. Resentment can build towards the other person, right? So he knows that too. So obviously he was like, really like, oh wow, this is a big deal. This is deep. This is really, really deep. But that wasn't the big trigger. The big trigger here was that when he then, after all of our discussion, responded with, moving forward, I will tell you every time I feel any type of way. And when he said it from a place of, like, from being assertive, and said it from a place of just no longer withholding how he feels, that immediately it made me remember about essentially a trauma, a trigger that never found resolution, that never got resolved. And let me share, guys, this is powerful, because when he said that with certainty, that he was not going to, that he was moving forward, he was going to speak what he felt, and that he was going to really try. Because it's true, when your pattern has been so solidified where it's best to just stay quiet, it's best to just stay quiet, the pattern is strong. There's so much momentum that you just kind of repeat that pattern even though you essentially don't want to. It's kind of like it basically hijacks you, and you now operate from that pattern of the one that has most momentum, which is staying quiet is the way. So anyway, when he said that, going back, when he made that declaration of, I will, moving forward, share with you what I'm feeling and what is making me feel uncomfortable and so forth, it's crazy how thin I heard. Okay, talk about an insecurity, and I was able to identify it. I then heard, when he said that, oh, so what does that mean? Does this mean that there has been many times that you felt some type of way but didn't feel comfortable to share how you feel about me? So this was playing in my head. So as this was playing in my head, I then got defensive. And defensiveness appears in your emotional body when you're trying to protect an emotion, a vulnerable emotion, an emotion that makes you feel fear, that makes you feel powerlessness. So you then have to be defensive to protect from feeling some type of way. So when I noticed that I was hearing that story that I was hearing, not what he was saying, but what I was hearing, I then said to him, okay, so you mean to tell me that, there is a lot of things that you don't really, that make you feel good? In other words, is there a lot of things that I do that you don't like, but you just swallow and you don't address? I then began to say, with a sense of attitude, or more of, not attitude, I want to say defensiveness. You know what? Well, let's share them right now. Let's put them on the table and be honest. Let's be vulnerable and be honest and share what we don't like. In your case, what you don't like, because I have always been vocal about what I feel. So in your case, let's put it on the table. And if we learn that we're not compatible, then we're not compatible. And why prolong this relationship if we're not compatible? Because if you want me to show up a certain way that you feel deemed to be compassionate for you because you deserve it, then maybe we're not compatible. Maybe you're looking for something that I am not. And when I said that, almost like putting the opening it for potential breakup, I was like, whoa, this is defensiveness. This is a cover emotion. What's underneath? And I'm telling you guys, when I went underneath that emotion and I allowed myself to go underneath that cover emotion of defensiveness, I began to cry. And my significant other was confused. Like, oh my God, what's going on? What happened? I said, this is how it looks like while I'm crying. This is how it looks like when someone is insecure and allows themselves to feel that insecurity. And I'm insecure right now and I'm crying because I hear he's not telling me this, but I hear that you're not accepting all of me, that you are not accepting my shortcomings. And that scares me because in a past relationship, when I had broken up with, or prior to breaking up with an individual, from nowhere I got sideswiped about my shortcomings and what irritated this person and what irked this person about me. Never said to me, but how he felt. So when we were over, it was apparently the opportunity to share how he really felt towards me. So that wound was not integrated. It was not healed. So when it, in a different way, but yet triggered me in the same way, when that opportunity arose, I then was able to say, oh my God, this makes me feel unsafe, and was able to correlate it and was able to go with the flow of where my emotions were taking me. So as I began to share with him that I was hearing that I'm not being fully accepted even with my shortcomings, which is something that I'm learning to fully accept and embrace, that scares me. It scares me that he in the future will come to the realization that I'm not really what he wants because I make him feel X, Y, and Z. Or he feels some type of way about the things that I do. in the beginning, he was liking them. In the beginning, he was willing to overlook them because, you know, he liked how I looked or whatever, right? So that was going through my mind. So as I was conveying to him that this is how it looks when someone feels insecure, or the fear that eventually we're not going to be compatible. But right now he's making an exception because he doesn't want to lose me because of whatever reason, superficial reasons or whatever. It brought me to tears. It brought me to tears because I felt scared. And I said this to him. And I was crying. And I even remember thinking, you would have never saw me behave like this. Years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you would have never, 21, 23, you would have never saw me say this to a man. Hey, I even told myself I was never going to cry before a man. That I was never going to let a man see me cry. It's crazy how, look at the progress, right? How I can sit back and say, wow, I literally got courageous to be opened, to allow myself to sink into the next phase of the next layer, the one of defensiveness, kind of sink into the next emotion, which was of fear, that same fear that I felt years ago with an ex of mine, where, oh my God, is this what's going to happen? Am I going to get sideswiped again? So if that's the case, let's just end it now if we're not going to be compatible. So basically what happened here is I was able to show in real time my significant other how it is, what an insecurity looks like, and what we hear when it's not really the case or what's being said, because he then of course immediately began to comfort me and say, that is not what I'm saying. That is not at all. You've only been honest with me, and I appreciate it. In fact, that has been the very thing that I admire. And he began to reassure me, obviously, and tell me not to cry. But I told him these cries are actually good cries. They're healthy. They are cries of release, and I got deep layer of healing, not only by vocalizing, but by allowing my body to mourn and to cry when it felt unsafe. And by just allowing my emotional body, my somatic body, to go through the emotions, I'm already letting go of old energy. We're talking about energy that I had stored way back then. So it was like that old trauma resurfaced again, but with my significant other this time around. So it was an opportunity to prove to myself, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to move forward? Am I going to stuff it? Am I going to not allow myself to dive beneath that defensiveness? Or am I going to just stay in that defensiveness and be angry and carry it with me, right? And I said no. I know too much. I'm too aware to keep it to myself. But the beauty of how I saw the process, the evolution of this, and how I was able to unpack it and have my significant other present to witness it, how it's powerful. So, something that I wanted to share is that also my significant other had mentioned, and this was several times he had said it. In fact, he reiterated it in our vacay in San Diego. He said, you know what I admire about you? What I noticed, essentially a virtue, is that you don't hold on to things. When something uncomfortable happens to you, or we encounter an experience, or we undergo pressure, you don't hold on to the experience, to that, bitter experience. You actually let it go. You don't let it linger on and govern your mood. And I told him, you know why it doesn't govern my mood? Because I let it out. Because I speak about how I feel. Because the moment anything that's uncomfortable arises, I talk about it. And by virtue of just talking about how I feel at that moment, in whatever experience that made me feel uncomfortable, gives me the opportunity to not carry it with me for the whole day, creating a damper on my day, and for the next day, and for the following week. And then there you go. I forget about it and I still have it stored in me. And it hasn't reached an outlet. It hasn't exited my body. That's powerful, guys. This is why I can't stop emphasizing on speak how you feel at all times. And I understand there's people that don't make it safe. And I get that. I really, really do. And I understand. But if that's your situation, that when you speak your truth and the other person doesn't create a safe space, then maybe it's an opportunity for you to admit to that. Tell them that. And if they don't want to hear you, maybe it's time to put boundaries, right? But they don't know unless if you don't convey how you feel with them. So they need to be given the opportunity for you to share with them how you feel. And I repeat that, they don't know until you share with them. So we can't condemn, per se, them for feeling a certain way and not knowing if we're not even opening up and sharing with them. We can't expect so much from them if we're not letting them into how we feel. Another example of the power of letting it out at the moment that it arises and speaking how you feel. First off, dogs. When dogs or animals get into a confrontation / a fight, okay, when they're done fighting, they stop and they shake themselves. They shake themselves because they're letting go of the residue of that anger, of that extra energy that caused them to get frustrated. So they're letting go of that aggressiveness that they're feeling. Super, super interesting, right? They then move along. They don't get cancer. They don't do none of that. They're not really running into those problems, right? Because they're holding on to emotions. So I think that was really, really interesting from a standpoint of how they work and how they're able to let go of the excess energy and just move on. And the reason why they shake themselves and they basically shake because they're letting go of that energy, that tension, that energy of aggressiveness, which is really cool to put into, to basically apply it to yourself, right? How, oh my God, this is why it's so important for us to speak what we feel, not wait until we can't take it anymore. So basically, I pretty much went over all the key things that I wanted to convey. Please, if you guys have any questions after watching this, send me a private message or you can put it on the comments. I just felt the need to share that and to give you a personal experience apply a personal experience to this concept of triggers and how these triggers are really gateways, door openers for us to put ourselves into our own attention. Bring ourselves into our own attention, right? What is really affecting me? What is really hurting me right now? What am I really frustrated about? Really, really, triggers hold the key. And if you are that person that feels constantly annoyed or constantly frustrated, there's a reason why. It's not because you want to be frustrated. It's not because you want to be difficult. It's not because it's fun for you. It's just overcomes you. It hijacks you. These emotions now steer the wheel, take over, and they're now governing, if you will, they dictate what you prefer and what you do thereafter. And if that's you, then you need to go underneath that frustration, underneath that irritation. There's something there that wants to be seen and ultimately resolved and ultimately integrated. So listen to those triggers, listen to your emotions, especially when you get annoyed, frustrated, irritated, angry. They are messengers. They're just cover-up emotions for a truth underneath. Also, I do want to share another example of what I'm saying. I could bluntly and honestly admit that when I don't get ready early enough, and let's say my significant other's coming over to pick me up and he's already at my home and I'm late, he's not upset with me. He's patiently waiting for me. I get upset. In fact, when I open the door, I tend to feel this pressure that I even forget to give him a hug and greet him properly because I am in this pressure. And in turn, I'm irritated, not with him, but I'm irritated with my circumstances. Literally grabbing my stuff and being annoyed. After dissecting why I would do this, because this was all the time I was late for a date or late for something. Every time I was late and they would come over to pick me up and he would come over to pick me up, I was, without fail, I would feel this irritation. And I had to ask myself, where is this irritation coming from? Where is this irritation coming from? And this irritation was coming from when I was little. When I was little, my dad would put us in this anxiety state. It's like, remember, every Sunday when we would go to church, we had to be ready. And the moment we were late, my dad would get super angry and my mom would get irritated. And we were in such a high alert. It was scary. I remember being scared and anxious being late, especially when my dad was waiting for us or my mom was waiting for us. But most importantly, when my dad was waiting for the rest of us, I was anxious, even to the point that it wasn't even me that he was waiting. If he was waiting for any of my siblings, he would make me feel anxious, even though I was ready. So I carried that over. My emotional body registered this anxious, and carried it over to real time. So every time I was late, when I was being picked up, my nervous system would react from a memory. Because I would always say, why? Why do I need to get anxious? Why do I feel pressure? Why do I feel nervousness that makes me get annoyed? And it was because I had a memory in my emotional body that was not resolved. I had a memory in my emotional body that was not resolved. So therefore, my emotional body reacted from a memory, from a situation that I clearly remembered, but didn't cognitively, but remembered through the scenario, would take me back into time. So therefore, I immediately, easily would get triggered. So why is this story very, very important? It's very important because this is what I'm saying, how if our body reacts impatiently, if we immediately react impatiently and don't have the patience and we get irritated, we have attitude and we get frustrated, it really is only a reflection of the things you still have not resolved in your life that are still trapped in your emotional body. And your body is only acting from memory over and over and over. So when I was able to correlate this, I'm now able to be present with me, telling myself it's okay, relax. It's okay. You don't have to, you don't have to meet an expectation. You don't have to be done. If you're not done, you're not done. That's okay. Powerful, knowing where it came from, it's allowing me to address it, to give it what it needs, to give me what I need. And when I receive what I need from a core, from a root standpoint, then it won't govern you like the way it typically does. Whenever you're positioned in a situation that triggers you, you won't be governed by that emotion that you haven't, that fear that you haven't resolved. And it's repeating itself, or it's manifesting through the circumstance. And if you can identify it, you can then address it. So yes, basically that is all that we have for today. So for you individuals that were able to tune in and accompany me, I appreciate that. Hopefully you were able to gain some perspective and understand how to identify triggers and how triggers look. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we think triggers are this, but then they really are more broad. And by my personal experience, hopefully you can then correlate it with your own experiences and say, oh my God, then that means the way that I behave comes from somewhere. Yes, it does. It's not that thing that's happening before you. You want to blame the thing that's happening before you, or you want to blame that person. But in all actuality, it is a fear that you don't want to feel again. It's a feeling, essentially. It's a fear of a feeling you don't want to feel again. Does that make sense? So you're trying to avoid, ultimately, you're trying to avoid a feeling. And when you feel that you are being threatened of ultimately feeling that feeling you're trying to avoid, then our coping mechanisms start manifesting. We start getting defensive, right? But defensive is only a cover emotion. Or getting irritated, only a cover emotion. Or annoyed, a cover emotion. I implore you and I invite you to go underneath that. Why? Why is it that whenever someone does this, or whenever they ask me this, or whenever I'm positioned in this situation and I seem to behave, from a space of annoyed or a space of irritation, ask yourself, what does this remind me of? When I was little, or when once upon a time did I had to experience a similar situation that made me feel powerless or felt fear, most importantly, fear. So as I allowed myself to go into those spaces, I was able to understand, oh my God, I'm still afraid of being sideswiped randomly and being told, guess what? I made you think that that I accepted all of you, but guess what? I really don't accept X, Y, and Z. And ultimately, that is scary, obviously, right? A lot of us who still are learning to love ourselves tend to want to be the very thing that they believe the person they're with want to see or wants them to be. And that's what people that still are in the process of finding their value. And the more you find your value, the more you realize that you're going to say, this is who I am. This is me. Either you take it or you leave it. And you tend to put yourself out there like that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't have time. It's exhausting to actually sugarcoat. It's exhausting to be someone I'm not. So when you get into that place where you are accepting yourself first, it's easy to be with the other person. And if they're embracing you, and 90% of the time, if he's meant for you, he'll embrace you. Obviously, he'll see that as a virtue. But you'll learn that is the only way, essentially. The more you start loving yourself, that is the only way, is to fully be you and see if you guys are compatible. So, yes, I shall conclude with that. I appreciate all of you guys, and hopefully my transparency really helps you go into you, and hope you realize that we're all in this journey, becoming better versions. We may be in different levels of awarenesses, right? Some of us have more practice than others, but I encourage you that as you are working with you, as you are addressing your emotions, please don't see them as burdens. They are indeed messengers. They are messengers of where you're stuck. They are messengers of what needs to be integrated. They're knocking on your door. We're living organisms that we are meant to create balance. So use it for what it is, and make not an enemy out of your emotions or out of your triggers. They really have so much to share, and that is why I'm putting myself out there. I don't fear. I don't fear about what are people going to say. I'm over that. I feel like the more I'm accepting myself, because there's layers. I'm still accepting myself on deeper layers, but the more I am accepting myself on those deeper layers that I'm capable of being transparent and not feel afraid that you guys may judge me, because it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that. It's you putting yourself out there because you're knowing the way, you're witnessing the way for real connection, for authentic connection and integration. And I would then be doing a disservice to myself and other people if I didn't put myself out there as examples for you guys to conceptualize the concept better. So, with all the love and full acceptance, Josie.